The moment I walked into the courtroom, my daughter, Serena, gave a little laugh, and my son-in-law, Darius Hayes, shook his head with open contempt. I was wearing my simple country clothes, worn-out boots, and held an old hat in my hands. I looked like a lost farmer, a confused old man who didn't understand where he was. I saw Serena whisper something to Darius, and he smiled with that arrogance that had always defined him. I heard her choked laugh, a sound that cut through my chest like a knife. To them, I was an embarrassment, an inconvenience, a silly old fool who had no business being there. But then the judge looked up. His eyes met mine. I watched as the color drained from his face, as his hand trembled on the wooden gavel. His lips moved, and he whispered something that silenced the entire courtroom. "My God," he said, "it's really him." Everyone turned to look at me. The silence became so thick I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Serena stopped smiling. Darius frowned, confused, staring at the judge as if he'd lost his mind. They had no idea who I truly was. Not until that moment. Because to them, I was just Pop. The old man who lived in a little farmhouse. The man they had ignored for years. The obstacle they now wanted to declare incompetent so they could take everything. But what they didn't know was that this courtroom had been my second home for 35 years. That every corner of this place held my footprints. And that the man sitting behind that bench owed me everything he was. If you've ever felt that your own family cast you aside, that they treated you as if you were invisible, as if everything you had done in your life was worthless, then you know exactly how I felt that morning. But let me tell you how I got there, how the daughter I raised, the one I loved more than my own life, decided I was useless. It all started 3 months earlier when I got the call about the death of my brother, Solomon. Solomon and I were more than brothers. We were like two halves of the same soul. He had died alone in his big house in Atlanta, while I lived my quiet life in the country, away from everything and everyone. Serena was the one who gave me the news. Her voice sounded strange over the phone, too controlled, too cold. "Pop," she said, "Uncle Solomon passed away. We need to talk about his estate. There are legal matters to resolve." I could barely breathe. Solomon was gone, and I hadn't even been there to say goodbye. My older brother, the man who had taught me to be strong when our father died, the man who always believed in me, even when no one else did. But Serena didn't ask how I felt. She didn't offer comfort. She only spoke of papers, property, and inheritance. "We'll need you to come to the city," she said. "There are documents you have to sign." Something in her tone bothered me, but I was too overwhelmed by grief to pay attention. I agreed to go. I packed a small bag and drove the 4 hours to Atlanta, where Serena lived with Darius in that enormous house I never understood why they needed. When I arrived, Darius opened the door. He didn't even greet me with a hug. He just nodded and stepped aside to let me pass, as if I were a traveling salesman and not his wife's father. Serena was in the living room, surrounded by papers. She hugged me quickly, but it was an empty embrace, without warmth. "Sit down, Pop," she said, pointing to the sofa. "We have important things to discuss." I sat. Darius stood behind her, arms crossed, looking at me as if I were a problem he needed to solve. Serena began to talk about Solomon's inheritance, a big property on the outskirts of the city, valued at over $800,000. Land, investments, bank accounts. "Solomon left everything to you," Serena said. But her voice didn't sound happy. It sounded annoyed, frustrated. "Pop, you live alone in the country. You don't need all that. You don't know how to handle that kind of wealth. You could lose everything. Darius intervened then, with that grave, authoritative voice he always used. "Mr. Vance," he said, without calling me Pop or father-in-law, as if we weren't family at all. "The sensible thing would be for you to let us handle this. Serena is an attorney. I have business experience. We can make sure everything is managed correctly." I looked at both of them. Something churned inside me. A silent alarm was starting to ring. "Managed?" I asked. "Or kept?" Serena's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous, Pop. We're trying to help you. You don't understand these things. You've been living like a hermit for years. The world changed, and you stayed behind." Her words hurt more than she could ever imagine, because she was right about one thing. After my wife died 5 years ago, I had withdrawn from everything. I had moved to the country, to a simple little house, to live in peace, away from the noise and lies of the city. But that didn't mean I was a fool. It didn't mean I had forgotten who I was before that quiet life. "I need time to think," I told them. "I'm not signing anything today." Serena exchanged a look with Darius, a look I didn't like at all. "All right, Pop," she said with a forced smile. "Take your time, but not too much. There are legal deadlines to meet." That night, I slept in their guest room. I couldn't close my eyes. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And my instinct, the instinct that had saved me so many times in my life, told me not to trust them. The next morning, I heard voices downstairs. I quietly got up and crept down the stairs barefoot. Serena and Darius were in the kitchen, talking in low voices, but not low enough. "He's a stubborn old man," Darius was saying. "If he won't sign willingly, we'll have to do it the hard way." "I know," Serena replied. "That's why I hired the lawyer. We're going to declare him incompetent. With his age, and the fact that Sam lives alone, isolated, it will be easy to convince a judge that he's not fit to handle an inheritance like this." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My own daughter, my little Serena, the girl I had carried in my arms, who had cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who had screamed with joy when I gave her the keys to her first car. That girl was now planning to rob me, to destroy me, to take the only thing my brother had left me. I stood there, in the darkness of the staircase as they continued talking, planning, plotting my destruction, as if I were an unimportant obstacle. And at that moment, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let this happen. Because if Solomon had taught me anything, if I had learned anything in all those years, it was that a man doesn't give up. No matter how dark the night gets, no matter if the one who betrays you is your own blood. I drove back to the country that same morning without saying goodbye. I didn't want Serena and Darius to know I had overheard them. I needed time to think, to remember who I had been before I became this lonely old man living among chickens and tomato plants. I drove the 4 hours back, my hands clenched on the steering wheel, feeling rage and pain fight inside my chest. When I got to my little house, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and let the memories flood in. Solomon and I grew up in a humble family. Our father was a carpenter, and our mother was a seamstress. We didn't have luxuries, but we had something much more valuable. We had principles. Dad always told us that a man without his word is not a man. He's just a shadow walking. When Dad died, I was barely 17, and Solomon was 22. He left college to work and support me through school. He sacrificed for me without a second thought. He worked in a factory during the day and studied law by correspondence at night. Years later, when I managed to become a lawyer, Solomon was already finishing his degree. We graduated almost at the same time. He with honors, despite everything. And we both swore the same thing. We were never going to be like those corrupt lawyers we saw every day, those who sold their souls for money. Solomon went into legal business, always clean, always correct. I took another path. I became a judge at 32, one of the youngest in the district's history. And for 35 years, I sat on that bench, defending the only thing that matters, the truth. But being an honest judge in a corrupt world has a price. I refused bribes that would have made anyone rich. I faced death threats. I lost friendships. There were nights my wife cried in fear because someone had left a threatening note on our door. Serena grew up seeing all that. She grew up watching her father earn a modest salary, while other judges built mansions. She grew up hearing her mother worry, watching me come home tired, exhausted from fighting battles that seemed to never end. Maybe that's why she chose to be different. Maybe that's why when she entered law school, she did so with an ambition that frightened me. "I don't want to be like you," she'd say. "I don't want to sacrifice myself for ideals that don't put food on the table." She met Darius in college. He came from a family with money, one of those families where shady business is disguised as legitimate enterprise. From the first day I saw him, I knew he wasn't right for my daughter, but she was in love. Or so I thought. Now, I think what she loved was the life he could give her. I opposed the wedding. We had a terrible fight. Serena screamed things at me that I will never forget. She told me I was a failure, that I had wasted my life being honest while others prospered. She told me she wasn't going to make the same mistake I did. My wife pleaded with me to give in, not to lose our daughter over pride. So I swallowed my rage and went to that wedding with a fake smile. I watched Serena marry a man I knew would destroy her someday. But it was her decision, her life. After that, our relationship was never the same. Visits became less frequent, calls shorter. When my wife became ill with cancer, Serena came to the hospital 3 times in 6 months. 3 times, always in a rush, always with excuses about important work, urgent cases, business trips. The day my wife died, I held her hand for hours. Serena arrived 2 hours after everything was over. She didn't cry. She just hugged me quickly and said she had to leave. She had an important hearing the next day. Darius didn't even come into the hospital. He stayed in the car, waiting for her. After the funeral, I ruled the house in the city. I couldn't keep living there, surrounded by memories, surrounded by a life that no longer existed. I bought this little house in southern Georgia, with the little I had saved. A simple place with a piece of land where I could grow my own food, where I could wake up to the sound of roosters and not the noise of the city. Serena told me I was making a mistake, that I was isolating myself from the world, that I was becoming a hermit. But I needed that silence. I needed that peace after decades of battles in the courts, after losing the love of my life. Solomon was the only one who understood me. He came to visit me every month. We would sit on this very porch, drink coffee, and talk about the old days. He told me about his business. I told him about my tomatoes and my chickens, and we laughed. God, how we laughed. The last time I saw him was 4 months ago. He looked tired, older. He told me he had been tidying up his affairs, putting everything in order. "Elias," he said to me, If anything happens to me, everything I have is yours. I have no children. I have no one else. You are my only real family." I told him not to talk nonsense, that he would live many more years, but he shook his head with a sad smile. "My heart is tired, brother," he said, "and the doctor gave me bad news." I didn't want to believe him. I didn't want to see the truth in his eyes. And now he was gone. And I hadn't been there to say goodbye. Sitting on my porch, with the coffee already cold in my hands, I understood something. Solomon had left me that inheritance, not just because I was his brother, but because he knew who I was, because he trusted me to do the right thing with it. And Serena wanted to take it from me. My own daughter wanted to destroy me, to keep money she didn't even need. I got up and went inside the house. I went to my small study, the room where I kept the few items from my former life. I opened an old drawer and took out a wooden box I hadn't opened in 5 years. Inside were my old judge ID, my robe carefully folded, photographs from my years in the courtroom, thank you letters from people I had helped, and a yellowed envelope with my name written in Solomon's hand. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter he had written years ago when we were both younger, when life still seemed full of possibilities. "Brother," the letter said, "if you are reading this, it's because I'm gone. I want you to know that everything I am, everything I achieved, was thanks to you. You taught me that money without honor is worthless, that success without integrity is just an illusion. I leave you everything I have because I trust you. I trust that you will do something good with it, something that would make Mom and Dad proud. Don't let anyone take what is yours. Don't let them make you feel small. You are the greatest man I have ever known." Tears rolled down my cheeks as I read those words. Solomon knew. Somehow, he knew this might happen. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years. The number for Lorraine, my former secretary at the courthouse, the woman who had worked with me for 20 years, who knew every case, every document, every secret of that place. Lorraine answered on the third ring. "Judge Vance," she said, surprise in her voice. She couldn't believe it was me. "Lorraine," I said, "I need your help." And then I told her everything. Lorraine arrived at my house 2 days later. I saw her get out of her old car, more stooped than I remembered, her hair completely white now. But her eyes were still the same, sharp, intelligent, full of that loyalty few people in this world possess. We hugged in silence. She smelled of lavender, as always. We went inside, and I made coffee while she looked around with a nostalgic smile. "You live like a monk, Judge," she said, sitting at the kitchen table. "But I guess after so many years dealing with the world's filth, a person needs this cleanliness." I told her everything. Every detail of what I had overheard at Serena's house. Every word of that conversation that had torn my soul apart. Lorraine listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her face growing increasingly serious. When I finished, she pulled an old folder from her purse and placed it on the table. "Judge," she said, "there's something you need to know. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from your daughter's lawyer. They wanted access to your court files, your old medical records, anything that could be used to prove mental decline or incapacity." A chill ran down my spine. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them all those files were sealed and they needed a court order. But Judge, they didn't stop. They hired a private investigator. That man was asking about you in the town, talking to your neighbors, trying to find anything they could use against you. And did they find anything? Lorraine smiled wryly. They found that you live alone, that you don't talk much to people, that you spend your days tending your garden. To them, that's evidence of social isolation, of possible cognitive decline. They're going to paint a picture of you as an old man lost in the past, incapable of making decisions. Rage started to boil inside me again, but Lorraine held up a hand. However, Judge, they made a mistake, a big one. She opened the folder and took out several documents. I never destroyed your files. I kept copies of everything. Your most important cases, your rulings, the letters of recognition, the testimonies of people whose lives you changed. And I kept something else. What? The records of certain cases where Darius Hayes's name appears. Your son-in-law isn't as clean as he thinks, Judge. 10 years ago, he was involved in a real estate fraud case. He was never formally charged because the main witness mysteriously disappeared. But the documents are there. The connections are there. I looked at the papers Lorraine had placed in front of me. They were copies of investigations, testimonies, suspicious transactions, everything perfectly organized, as only Lorraine knew how to do. Why did you keep this? I asked. Because you taught me something, Judge. You taught me that the truth must always have backup, that documents speak when voices are silenced. I kept this because I knew that someday it might be necessary. And it seems that day has arrived. We spent the entire afternoon reviewing the documents. Lorraine had done an extraordinary job. She had dates, names, connections between shell companies and bank accounts. She had testimonies from employees who had worked for Darius and who had seen things they never dared to report. But that wasn't all. Lorraine pulled out her phone and showed me something else, an audio recording. I recorded this a week ago, she said. Your daughter called me. She wanted me to testify in her favor, to say that you had shown signs of mental confusion during your last years as a judge. I told her I would think about it. She played the audio. It was Serena's voice, clear and cold. Ms. Beaumont, it said, I understand your loyalty to my father, but you have to understand that this is for his own good. He can't handle such a large inheritance. He'll lose it. He'll be a victim of scammers. We just want to protect him. Lorraine's voice in the recording responded calmly. And how much would I be paid for that testimony? There was a pause. Then Serena replied, We could talk about $50,000. Cash. No one has to know. I stopped the audio. I couldn't listen anymore. That wasn't my daughter. Or maybe it was, and I had never wanted to see it. There's more, Judge, Lorraine said softly. 2 days ago I got the summons. They're going to present the case in Judge Preston Ellis's courtroom. Preston? Of course, I remembered. Preston had been my intern almost 30 years ago. A brilliant but insecure young man who almost made the worst mistake of his career by accepting a bribe from a major criminal. I discovered him in time, confronted him in my office, and gave him a lesson he never forgot. Because of that, Preston rejected the money, reported the attempted bribe, and became one of the most respected judges in the district. He doesn't know you're the defendant, Lorraine continued. The documents just say Elias Vance, without mentioning your former title as judge. Serena and Darius did everything they could to make sure that information didn't appear in the official papers. They want this to seem like a simple case of mental incapacity of an ordinary old man. I understand, I said. They want Preston to make the decision without knowing who I really am. Exactly. And if he finds out during the hearing, it will be too late for him to recuse himself from the case. The judgment will have to be given that same day, according to the procedures they requested. A quick hearing, with no appeals, no time to react. It was a clever plan, I had to admit. Serena had learned the legal system well. She knew how to manipulate the timing, how to present the documents, how to create a situation where I would be defenseless. But she had forgotten something. She had forgotten who her father was. She had forgotten that I spent 35 years facing criminals far more dangerous than she was. She had forgotten that every case I judged taught me something about human nature, about its tricks, about its lies. "Lorraine," I said, "I need you to do something else for me." "Anything, Judge." "I need you to contact some people who worked with me, who know me. I need testimonies, letters, anything that proves my mind is perfectly clear. And I need you to find my brother Solomon's attorney. He has the original will documents. I want to know exactly what Solomon left and how." Lorraine nodded and quickly took notes. "Anything else?" "Yes, I need this to be kept secret. Serena and Darius can't know we're preparing a defense. They have to believe I'm just a confused old man who will show up to court without understanding what's happening." "Understood. Are you going to hire an attorney?" "No, I'm going to represent myself." Lorraine looked at me in surprise. "Judge, that's risky. Very risky." "I know," I said. "But I also know that no attorney is going to defend this case with the passion that I can. No attorney has what I have. 35 years of experience in that courtroom. The exact knowledge of how every procedure works, and above all, the truth on my side." Lorraine closed her folder and looked at me with those eyes that had seen so many battles by my side. "You were always the best, Judge, and I know you still are. We are going to win this." After Lorraine left, I stayed alone in my house as the sun set behind the mountains. I went out onto the porch with a cup of tea and sat in my old rocking chair. The chickens were already in their coop. The crickets were beginning their nightly concert. I thought about Serena, about the girl she had been. I remembered when she was 6 years old and fell off her bike. She came running to me, knees bleeding, crying. I hugged her, cleaned her wounds, and told her everything would be all right. "Daddy will always protect you," I said. And now, that same girl wanted to destroy me. I pulled Solomon's letter from my pocket and read it again under the sunset light. "Don't let anyone make you feel small. You are the greatest man I have ever known. Brother," I whispered to the wind, "I am going to honor your memory. I'm going to fight this battle the way you taught me, with my head held high, with the truth as my only weapon." The next 2 weeks were intense. Lorraine worked tirelessly. She got statements from 12 of my former colleagues, all retired judges or respected lawyers who attested to my mental clarity and character. She found Solomon's attorney, who confirmed the will was clear and legal. 3 days before the hearing, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Serena. Her voice sounded sweet, almost affectionate, like when she was a child and wanted something from me. "Pop," she said, "how are you? I've been thinking about you a lot. I know things have been strained between us lately." "Strained?" I repeated. That's an interesting way to describe it. There was an awkward pause. "Look, Pop, I know all this talk about Uncle Solomon's inheritance scared you, but we really just want to help. Darius and I have been talking, and we thought maybe we were too harsh with you." "Oh, really?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yes. In fact, we wanted to invite you to dinner. We could talk about all of this calmly, as a family. No lawyers, no pressure. Just you, me, and Darius, like in the old days." The old days never included Darius, I thought. But I said, "When?" "Tomorrow night. Come at 7 o'clock. I'll make your favorite dish. That chicken and potatoes you loved." "All right," I said. "I'll be there." When I hung up, I knew exactly what they were doing. A final attempt to get me to sign something before the hearing. Or maybe they wanted to record me saying something they could use against me. They thought I was a fool, a naive old man who would fall into their trap. I called Lorraine and told her the plan. She warned me not to go, that it was too risky, but I needed to see how far they were capable of going. I needed to look my daughter in the eye one last time before the court. The following night, I drove to Atlanta. I arrived at their house at exactly 7 o'clock. Darius greeted me with a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Vance, it's good to see you. Come in. Come in." The house smelled of home cooking, but everything felt staged, artificial. Serena came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked so much like her mother in that moment that my heart ached. "Daddy," she said, hugging me, "I'm so glad you came. Come, sit down. Dinner is almost ready." We sat in the elegant dining room with those expensive dishes that always seemed unnecessary to me. Serena served the chicken, but I could barely eat. Every bite tasted like betrayal. Darius started the conversation with his false kindness. "Mr. Vance, we've been thinking a lot about your situation. The house in the country, living alone at your age, with no one to help if something happens. It must be very lonely." "I have everything I need," I replied. "But Pop," Serena intervened, "it's not just what you need now. It's about your future. What if you get sick? What if you have an emergency and no one is around? We worry about you." Her words sounded rehearsed, like a badly acted script. I looked into her eyes, searching for a glimpse of the girl I had raised. But I only saw calculation. I only saw ambition disguised as concern. "It's funny that you worry so much now," I said. "You didn't worry when your mother was dying. You didn't worry for the last 5 years while I lived alone. But now that $800,000 is at stake, suddenly I'm your priority." Serena's face hardened. "That's not fair, Pop. That's not fair." I looked at her directly. "I heard your conversation with Darius 3 weeks ago. I know exactly what you're planning. I know you want to declare me incompetent to keep Solomon's inheritance." The silence that followed was dense as concrete. Darius dropped his fork. Serena paled, then turned red. "You spied on us," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "I was in your house," I replied. "I came downstairs for a glass of water and heard my own daughter planning to destroy me. It wasn't spying, it was finding out who you really are." Darius stood up abruptly. "You don't understand anything, old man. That money should be ours. Serena is the only family he has left. It's natural for her to inherit." "Solomon decided who to leave his estate to," I said, remaining calm, though inside I felt like a volcano. "And he left it to me because he knew you two would do exactly this." Serena also stood up. Her face was transformed by anger. "You know what, Pop? You're right. If I want that money, I deserve it after years of watching you waste your life on your stupid principles. While other judges got rich, you lived like a poor man for your integrity. Look where that integrity got you. A miserable little house in the country, alone and bitter." Her words were knives, each one designed to hurt. And they succeeded. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me bleed. "At least I can look at myself in the mirror," I said, getting up as well. "At least I never betrayed my family for money. At least I know what honor means." "Honor?" Darius laughed scornfully. "Honor doesn't pay the bills, Mr. Vance. Honor doesn't build businesses. Honor is for fools like you who end up old and alone." I walked toward the door. Serena followed me. "Pop, wait." Her voice now held a tone of panic. It doesn't have to be this way. We can reach an agreement. We can split the inheritance. 50-50. You keep your part. We keep ours. I stopped and turned to look at her. And there I saw what I had been denying myself for years. I saw that my daughter had become someone I didn't know, someone my wife would not have recognized, someone who had sold her soul for a life of luxury and appearances. There is no possible agreement, Serena. Solomon wanted me to have that inheritance, and I am going to respect his will. If you want to fight for it, I'll see you in court. Fine, she said, and her voice became cold as ice. I'll see you in court. But I warn you, Pop, I have witnesses who are going to testify about your mental state. I have documents that prove your social isolation. I have everything I need for a judge to declare you incompetent. And when he does, you will not only lose the inheritance, you will also lose control over your own life. You'll be assigned a guardian, and that guardian will be me. The threat hung in the air like poison. Darius came up behind her with a victorious smile. You should have accepted our deal, Mr. Vance. Now you're going to lose everything. I walked out of that house, feeling that I had just lost my daughter forever. I drove back to the country, with silent tears rolling down my cheeks. I wasn't crying for the money or the inheritance. I was crying for the girl who had disappeared, replaced by this cold, calculating woman. 2 days later, the day of the hearing arrived. I woke up early, before dawn. I showered, shaved carefully, but I didn't put on a suit. I didn't dress as Judge Elias Vance. I put on my country clothes, my work shirt, my worn-out boots. I wanted Serena and Darius to see me exactly as they saw me, as a simple, defenseless, old farmer. Lorraine arrived at 6 in the morning. She carried a briefcase with all the documents we would need. Judge, she said, looking at my clothes, are you sure about this? Completely sure, I replied. Let them think they've already won. The blow will be harder. We drove in silence to Atlanta. The 4-hour journey felt eternal, and yet too short. Lorraine reviewed all the key points with me, all the documents, all the testimonies we had prepared. When we arrived at the courthouse, the building stood imposing against the blue morning sky. How many times had I entered through those doors? I thought. How many times had I climbed those stairs with my black robe, my briefcase full of cases and rulings? Now I entered dressed as a farmer, with an old hat in my hands, stooped as if the weight of the years had defeated me. But inside me, Judge Elias Vance was more alive than ever, and he was ready for the most important battle of my life. Not the battle for Solomon's money, not the battle for property or bank accounts, but the battle for my dignity, for my honor, for showing my daughter that you couldn't destroy a man who had spent his whole life defending the truth. Lorraine walked beside me, her briefcase full of documents that were our ammunition. We slowly climbed the stairs. Each step brought me closer to the moment of truth. And then we arrived. The courtroom doors were open. Inside, I could see Serena and Darius sitting with their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who probably charged $500 an hour. Serena looked confident, elegant, in a perfect business dress. I took a deep breath and pushed the doors open. The sound made every head turn toward me. I saw Serena's smile. I watched as Darius nudged their lawyer and pointed toward me with his chin, as if to say, "Look, there's the old fool." I walked slowly down the center aisle, dragging my feet a little, stooped, with my hat clutched in my hands. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to look like. A confused old man, out of place, lost in a world he no longer understood. Serena leaned into Darius and whispered something. He laughed quietly, shaking his head with contempt. That moment was etched into my memory like a photograph. The moment my own daughter publicly mocked me, believing she had already won. But then something changed in the room. Judge Preston Ellis entered through the side door. He wore his black robe, his face serious and professional. He walked toward his seat without looking at anyone, as befits a judge starting a hearing. Everyone stood up. The bailiff announced, "Court in session, His Honor, Judge Preston Ellis presiding." Preston sat down and began to organize his papers. He started reading aloud. Case number 45,328. Petition for declaration of mental incapacity, presented by Serena Vance Hayes against Mr. Elias Vance. His voice was firm, professional. He hadn't looked at me yet. He was following the procedure as he should, reading the documents before addressing the parties. He continued, "The petitioner alleges that Mr. Elias Vance, aged 66 years, is not in appropriate mental condition to manage the assets inherited from his deceased brother, Solomon Vance, whose estate is valued at approximately $800,000. The petitioner requests to be designated as the legal guardian of the defendant." Serena was smiling. Darius nodded with satisfaction. Their lawyer already had his first folder open, ready to present his case. And then Preston looked up from his papers. His eyes swept the room. First, he looked at Serena and her lawyer. Then his gaze moved to where I was sitting, alone on the defendant's bench, in my country clothes, with my hat in my lap. Our eyes met. I watched as the color left his face. I watched as his hands, those firm hands that held the gavel of justice, began to tremble. His mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something. But the words were stuck in his throat. He stood up abruptly, so fast that his chair rolled backward with a harsh sound. The papers on his desk shifted with the wind of his sudden movement. "My God," he whispered. His words were barely audible, but in the absolute silence of the room, everyone heard them. "My God, is it really him?" All heads turned toward me. Serena's lawyer frowned, confused. Serena stopped smiling. Darius leaned forward, trying to understand what was happening. Preston gripped the edge of his desk as if he needed physical support. Judge Vance," he said, and his voice broke. "Are you Judge Elias Vance?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with shock, disbelief, and something that looked a lot like fear. I stood up slowly. I let my posture change. The stooped back straightened. The slumped shoulders squared. The low-held head lifted with dignity. In that moment, I stopped being the confused old farmer and became who I had always been. "Yes, Preston," I said, my voice clear and firm. "It's me." The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed. No one moved. It was as if time itself had stopped in that courtroom. Preston walked down from the bench, something completely irregular, something a judge never does during a hearing. But he wasn't acting as a judge at that moment. He was acting as the young intern I had saved 30 years ago, as the man whose career I had protected when he was about to destroy it. He approached me with uncertain steps. His face showed a mixture of emotions, shock, respect, and something that looked like shame. "Judge Vance," he repeated. The documents didn't... They didn't say you were..." "I know," I said calmly. "It was intentional. They wanted this to look like a simple case. Just some old man of no importance. I turned towards Serena. Her face had lost all its color. Her mouth was open in shock. Darius had stood up, looking between Preston and me with growing horror in his eyes. "Can someone explain to me what is going on here?" Serena's lawyer said, clearly confused. "Who is this man?" Preston turned to him. "This man," he said, his voice trembling, "is Judge Elias Vance. He was a magistrate in this court for 35 years. He is a legend in this judicial circuit. He is the most honorable man who has ever held this office." The lawyer paled. Serena collapsed into her chair, as if her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Darius grabbed the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. I didn't know," the lawyer stammered. "My client never mentioned the documents." "No, of course she didn't mention it," I said. "My daughter did everything possible to hide that information, because she knew that if any judge in this district discovered who I truly was, her case would fall apart." Preston returned to his bench, but his professional composure was broken. He sat down heavily, running a hand over his face. "I need a recess," he said. I need to process this." "Your Honor," Serena's lawyer intervened with a desperate voice, "my client has the right to present her case. The fact that the defendant is a former judge does not change the facts of his current situation." "The facts?" Preston asked, and there was steel in his voice now. "You want to talk about facts? The fact is that you are accusing the man who wrote some of the most brilliant rulings in this court's history of mental incompetence, the man who never, not once in 35 years, had a sentence overturned on appeal. The man whose legal mind was so sharp that lawyers with 20 years of experience trembled when presenting cases in front of him." "But, Your Honor," the lawyer insisted, "that was in the past. We are talking about his current condition. My client has evidence that he lives in isolation, without significant social contact, in conditions that suggest—" I stood up. "With your permission, Your Honor," I said, "I would like to represent myself in this case." Preston looked at me. There were tears in his eyes now. "Judge Vance," he said, "you know you have that right. But you also know that representing yourself in a case of this nature is exactly what I need to do." I interrupted him, "because no one can defend my mind and my honor better than myself." I looked toward Serena. She couldn't meet my gaze. Her eyes were fixed on the table in front of her. Darius was gripping her arm, whispering something urgently in her ear. "Your Honor," I continued, "if you allow me, Brandon, I would like to begin with a statement, not a formal declaration of defense yet. Just a few words about why we are really here today." Preston nodded slowly. "Proceed, Judge Vance, and I apologize. I know you no longer practice, but I cannot call you anything else. You will always be Judge Vance to me." His words caused a murmur in the room. There were some people in the public benches, court employees, who had come in to observe what they thought would be a routine case. Now everyone was whispering among themselves, their faces showing recognition, shock, and fascination. I cleared my throat and began to speak. 30 years ago, I said, a young intern worked in my office. He was brilliant, dedicated, with a promising future, but he was in a desperate financial situation. His mother was ill and needed expensive treatments he couldn't afford. Preston closed his eyes. He knew exactly what story I was about to tell. A major criminal was being tried in my court, I continued. His associates approached that young intern and offered him $50,000 in cash. All he had to do was leak information about my strategy, about how I was evaluating the case, about my leanings. The silence in the room was absolute. Serena finally looked at me, her eyes wide. That young intern, I continued, was about to accept He came to my office one afternoon with a confession on his lips, with tears in his eyes, his soul torn between his love for his mother and his professional integrity. And I told him something he never forgot. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. I told him that easy money always comes with a price that is much higher than it seems, that once you sell your integrity, you never get it back. That he could save his mother in an honest way or a dishonest way. But if he chose the latter, he would lose not only his career, but his soul. Preston had tears rolling down his cheeks now, without trying to hide them. That young man rejected the money, I continued. He reported the attempted bribe, and I helped him find legal ways to get funds for his mother. We organized a collection among the court employees. We got the hospital to accept a payment plan. His mother received her treatment, and that young intern learned the most important lesson of his life. I looked directly at Preston. That young man grew up to become one of the most respected judges in this district. A man of honor, a man who never forgot that integrity is worth more than all the money in the world. Preston wiped his tears with the back of his hand. His voice was barely a whisper when he spoke. You saved my life, Judge Vance, and my mother's. She lived 10 more years thanks to you. That's why I'm here today, Preston, I said. Because my own daughter, the girl I raised, with those same values I taught you, is standing in front of this court trying to steal my brother's inheritance. She is using the legal system that I respected all my life as a weapon against me. I turned toward Serena. Her face was pale, her hands trembling on the table. My daughter believes I am a foolish old man living in isolation because my mind is deteriorating. But the truth is, I went to the country because after 35 years seeing the worst face of humanity in this court, I needed to remember that goodness still exists in the world. I needed peace. After losing my wife, I needed silence after decades of shouting and arguing. Serena's lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, this is very emotional, but it does not change the facts of the case. We have witnesses. Witnesses, I said, turning to him. What kind of witnesses? The private investigator they hired to spy on me? The neighbors they interrogated, trying to find anything at all, that they could twist to make me look bad. I took some folded papers from my pocket. Lorraine stood up from where she was sitting in the public area and brought me her briefcase. I opened it on the defendant's table. Your Honor, I said, I also have witnesses. I have letters from 12 former colleagues, all respected judges and lawyers, who attest to my mental clarity. I have documents proving that I have been managing my small property perfectly competently. I have bank statements that show I handle my finances better than many people half my age. I began pulling documents from the briefcase, placing them on the table one by one. Every paper was a piece of evidence. Every letter was a voice speaking for me. But more than that, I continued, I have evidence of why my daughter is really doing this. And it has nothing to do with concern for my well-being. Serena stood up abruptly. Pop, please? Her voice cracked. Don't do this. Don't do what, Serena? I asked. Don't tell the truth? You had no problem planning my destruction. Why should I have a problem exposing you? Lorraine approached and handed me a small recorder. I placed it on the table where everyone could see it. Your Honor, I said, this recording was made 1 week ago. It is a telephone conversation between my daughter and Ms. Lorraine Beaumont, who was my secretary for 20 years in this court. Preston leaned forward. Proceed. I pressed the playback button. Serena's voice filled the room, clear and cold. Ms. Beaumont, I understand your loyalty to my father, but you have to understand that this is for his own good. He can't handle such a large inheritance. He'll lose it. He'll be a victim of scammers. We just want to protect him. Then came Lorraine's voice. And how much would I be paid for that testimony? The pause was long. Then Serena's reply. We could talk about $50,000. Cash. No one has to know. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. Serena had her head in her hands. Darius was pale as a ghost. The lawyer had closed his folder and seemed to be seriously considering running out of the room. My daughter attempted to bribe a witness, I said. She offered $50,000 in cash for someone to lie under oath about my mental state. And she wants to be my guardian. She wants to control my life and my money. Your Honor, the lawyer tried again, with a desperate voice. That recording could have been taken out of context. It could have been edited. It was not edited, Lorraine said, standing up from the public area. I made that recording, Judge Ellis. You know me. I worked in this court for 20 years under Judge Vance. I never lied then, and I am not lying now. That conversation happened exactly as it sounds. Preston nodded. I know, Ms. Beaumont. Her testimony is credible to this court, but there is more. Continue. I pulled another folder from Lorraine's briefcase. Much more. Because while my daughter was investigating me, I was investigating my son-in-law. Darius jumped up. This is ridiculous. I am not on trial here. No, I said, looking directly at him. Not yet, but you should be. I opened the folder and took out documents. Your Honor, Darius Hayes was involved 10 years ago in a real estate fraud case. The investigations never led to formal charges because the main witness mysteriously disappeared. But the documents are here, the suspicious transfers, the shell companies, everything. Darius's face went from pale to red. That was never proven. I was never accused of anything. Because the witness disappeared, I repeated. But the documents don't lie. And these documents show a pattern of manipulation, deception, and the use of the legal system for personal gain. I placed the papers on the judge's bench. Preston looked at them briefly, his eyes moving quickly over the pages. My son-in-law convinced my daughter that I was an obstacle to their wealth, I continued. He convinced her that they deserved my brother's money more than I did. And together, they designed this plan to steal not only my inheritance, but my dignity, my freedom, and my right to control my own life. I turned toward Serena. She was finally looking at me, tears streaming down her face. Do you know when you broke my heart, daughter? It wasn't when I heard your plan to declare me incompetent. It wasn't when you offered that bribe to Lorraine. It was at dinner 3 days ago, when you looked at me and told me my principles were for fools. That honor was worthless. My voice cracked, but I continued. Because in that moment, I knew I had failed as a father. I knew I couldn't pass on the most important thing, that there are things more valuable than money, that integrity is priceless, that family is not betrayed for greed. Serena was openly sobbing. Pop, I'm sorry. I didn't... Darius convinced me that... I'm so sorry. Darius grabbed her arm. Don't say anything else, Serena. Don't admit anything. But Serena shook him off. Let go of me, she said. I stood up and looked at her. My whole life, she said. Her voice choked. I saw you reject opportunities for your principles. I saw others prosper while you barely survived on your judge's salary. I saw Mom worry about medical bills while you worried about justice, and I swore I wouldn't be like that. I swore I would take opportunities, that I would be successful, that I would have the life you never gave us. Her words were like daggers, but she was finally telling the truth. She was finally showing what was really in her heart. And look where that led you, Serena, I said softly. It led you to this courtroom, trying to destroy your own father. It led you to offer bribes, to manipulate the system, to become exactly what I spent 35 years fighting. She covered her face with her hands, her sobs filling the room. Preston gently tapped his gavel. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "sit down. Mrs. Vance Hayes, sit down. This court needs a 30-minute recess to review all this evidence." "But, Your Honor," Serena's lawyer protested, "my client is clearly under emotional stress. Perhaps we should postpone." "There will be no postponement," Preston said firmly. "This case will be resolved today. 30 minutes. He struck his gavel and left the room. During the recess, I sat on the bench and closed my eyes. I felt a presence beside me. I opened my eyes and saw Serena standing there, with Darius behind her, looking at her furiously. "Pop," she whispered, "can we talk?" I looked at Darius. "Alone," I said. Darius opened his mouth to protest, but Serena gestured to him. "Leave us," she said. "Please." He glared at her but walked away. Serena sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance between us. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice hoarse. "I have no excuse for what I did. But you need to know that when all this started, I really believed I was doing the right thing. Darius convinced me that you couldn't handle so much money, that someone was going to scam you." "And the $50,000? I asked. "Was that for my good, too?" She lowered her head. "No, that was when I was already too deep into this. When I had already crossed so many lines that one more didn't seem to matter." I looked at my daughter. Tears had ruined her perfect makeup. Her hair, always so neat, was disheveled from running her hands through it. She looked small, lost, like when she was a child and had done something wrong. "When did you become this?" I asked. "When did you stop being the girl who cried when she saw injustice? The one who told me she wanted to be like me when she grew up?" "When I understood that being like you meant sacrificing everything," she replied. "When I saw Mom cry because we couldn't pay the medical bills on time. When my friends went on vacation to Europe, and I worked all summer to pay for college. When you decided that money mattered more than everything else," I interrupted her. "Serena, your mother never blamed me for our struggles. She was proud of me, proud that her husband was a man of principle. She was trapped in that life with you," Serena said bitterly. "Your mother loved me," I said, my voice trembling. "We loved each other, and we loved you more than anything in this world. If she could see you now, if she could see what you have become—" "No," Serena stood up abruptly. "Don't use Mom against me. She's not here. She doesn't know what it's like to live in this world where everything costs money, where people judge you by what you have, where you sold your soul for a big house and an expensive car," I finished for her, "where you betrayed your father for $800,000 that you don't even need." She looked at me with eyes full of mixed pain and rage. "You're right," she said. "You're right about everything. I'm exactly what you say I am, a traitor, a terrible daughter, someone Mom would be disappointed in." She turned to leave, but I stopped her. "Serena, wait." She stopped, but didn't turn back. "I still love you," I said. "You are my daughter. That will never change. But I cannot let this happen. I cannot let you take what Solomon wanted me to have, not for the money, but because it would be betraying his memory." "I know," she whispered. "I know, Pop." Darius appeared then, grabbing her arm. "Enough of this scene," he told her. "The lawyer says we can still win if you stand firm." if you don't admit anything else. Let go of me, Serena said, shaking off his hand. What? Darius looked at her in surprise. Let go of me, she repeated more forcefully. This is over, Darius. I'm not going through with this. Darius's face turned red with anger. Are you crazy? After everything we invested in this case, after the lawyer's fees, the private investigator, you're going to give up now because of a sudden attack of conscience? It's not an attack of conscience, Serena said. It's realizing that I became a monster and that you helped me become one. I didn't force you to do anything, Darius hissed. You wanted that money as much as I did. Don't play the victim now. You're right, Serena said. I wanted the money, but I also wanted to believe I was doing it for the right reasons, that I was protecting my father. You helped me convince myself of that lie. Darius looked at her with contempt. You're weak, just like your father. That's why you'll never have anything in life. I stood up. Then I have something you will never have, Darius. I have my dignity. I have the ability to look at myself in the mirror without feeling disgust. And I have the respect of people who are worthwhile. Darius laughed bitterly. Respect? Respect doesn't pay the bills, old man. Respect doesn't buy houses or cars. Respect is what people without money tell themselves to feel better. That's why you'll never understand me, I said. Because for you, everything has a price. Everything can be bought or sold. You even convinced my daughter to sell her relationship with me for money. The bailiff entered. The judge is ready to continue, he announced. We all returned to our places. Preston entered and sat down. His face was serious, professional. He had recovered his composure now. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he began, this court has reached several conclusions. First, there is absolutely no evidence that Mr. Elias Vance suffers from mental deterioration or incapacity to manage his own affairs. On the contrary, the evidence demonstrates a clear, organized, and perfectly competent mind. Serena's lawyer sank into his chair. Serena stared blankly at the table. Darius clenched his fists. Second, Preston continued, this court finds that the petition was presented under false pretenses with the intent to manipulate the legal system for the personal gain of the petitioners. The evidence of the attempted bribe is particularly concerning. He looked directly at Serena. Mrs. Vance Hayes, your behavior in this case has been not only inappropriate, but potentially criminal. This court is considering referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible investigation of attempted bribery and perjury. Serena paled further. Your Honor, her lawyer whispered, my client is willing to withdraw the petition. There is nothing to withdraw, Preston interrupted him. This court rejects the petition completely and without possibility of appeal. Mr. Elias Vance maintains full legal capacity over all his affairs and property. He struck his gavel firmly. Case closed. But Preston did not stand up. He remained seated, looking at me. Judge Vance, he said, if you will allow me a personal comment off the official record. Proceed, I said. You taught me that justice is not just laws and procedures. It is about doing the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Today, you reminded me of that lesson. And this court, this district, all of us owe you much more than we can ever repay. He stood up and came down from his bench once more. He approached me and extended his hand. Thank you, Judge Vance, for everything. I took his hand. His eyes were moist again. You were a good student, Preston, and you are a great judge. Your mother would be proud. He nodded, unable to speak. Then he turned and quickly left the room. The room began to empty. Serena's lawyer packed his things quickly and left without looking back. Darius stood up and looked at Serena with fury. "This is your fault," he told her. "Your weakness cost us everything." "No," she replied, her voice tired. "My ambition cost us everything. Now go." Darius looked at her as if he were going to say something more. But finally, he shook his head in disgust and walked out of the courtroom. His steps echoed on the marble floor, each one taking him farther away from us. Serena remained seated, immobile, staring at her hands on the table. Lorraine approached me and whispered, "Judge, we have to go. There are papers to sign at the registry office to secure the inheritance." "I know," I replied. Give me a moment." I walked over to Serena and sat down beside her again. The courtroom was almost empty. Only the bailiff at the door and a clerk collecting papers remained. "What are you going to do now?" I asked her. She shrugged without looking at me. "I don't know. I guess Darius is going to file for divorce. That whole idea was his from the beginning. Now that it failed, I'm useless to him." "And what do you want?" She finally looked at me. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. "I want to go back in time. I want to be the girl who thought her pop was a hero again. I wish I had never met Darius. I wish Mom were here to tell me what to do." "Your mother would tell you to admit your mistake, to face it, and to work to be better," I said. "She would tell you that one mistake doesn't define who you are, but what you do next does." "You lost 10 years of your life with that man," I continued. 10 years letting him convince you that principles are for fools. 10 years moving away from who you really are. Don't lose one more day." "Will you ever forgive me?" she asked, her voice small. I sighed. "I don't know, Serena. Right now, I'm too hurt to know how I feel. But know this, the door to my house will never be closed to you. If you ever decide to go back to being the daughter I raised, if you decide to reject everything Darius taught you, and remember what your mother and I tried to give you, then we will talk." She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks again. "I'll try, Pop. I don't know if I can change that much, but I'll try." I stood up. Lorraine was waiting for me at the door with her briefcase. I walked toward her, but stopped and turned, one last time. "Serena," I said. She looked up. "Your mother used to say that the road back home is always lit, no matter how dark the night." I left the courthouse with Lorraine. The afternoon sun hit my face, warm and bright. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh air after hours in that closed room. "You did it, Judge," Lorraine said with a smile. "I knew you would." "It doesn't feel like a victory," I replied. "Because it's not," she said wisely. "It's justice, and justice sometimes hurts, even when it's necessary." We spent the next 2 hours at the registry office signing documents, establishing accounts, transferring properties. Solomon's inheritance was substantial. The big house on the outskirts of Atlanta, agricultural land, investments, all now legally mine, protected from any future attempts to take it. When we finished, it was already night. Lorraine offered for me to stay at her house, but I needed to return to my home. I needed my little house, my porch, my chickens. I needed the silence of the country after the noise of this day. I drove back under a sky full of stars. The 4 hours felt endless. My mind kept replaying moments of the day. Preston's face recognizing me, the recording of Serena's voice, offering the bribe, the tears in her eyes when she spoke to me at the end. When I reached my house, it was almost midnight. The porch lights were off. Everything was dark and silent. I went inside slowly, turned on a lamp, made myself tea, and sat in my old armchair, with the hot cup in my hands, letting everything wash over me. The emotional exhaustion, the pain, the sadness of having won a battle, but lost my daughter in the process. I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since my wife's death. I cried for the girl Serena had been. I cried for the lost years, for the destroyed relationship, for everything that could have been different if I'd seen the signs sooner. But I also felt something else. I felt relief. Relief at having defended my dignity. Relief at having honored Solomon's memory. Relief at knowing that I could still fight when necessary, that I hadn't become the defenseless old man Serena thought I was. The following days were strange. I returned to my routine, waking up with the sun, feeding the chickens, working in the garden. But something had changed inside me. I no longer felt like a man hiding from the world. I felt like a man who had consciously chosen his path. 1 week after the trial, I received a call from a different lawyer. He informed me that Darius had filed for divorce from Serena, but there was something else. The district attorney had opened an investigation into Darius's business activities, based on the documents I presented in court. "And my daughter?" I asked. "Is she in trouble too?" The lawyer hesitated. "For now, no. The DA believes she was manipulated by her husband. They are treating the attempted bribe as an error in judgment under undue influence. She will probably receive an official reprimand and will have to do community service, but she won't go to prison." I felt relieved about that. As hurt as I was, I didn't want to see my daughter in jail. 2 weeks later, I drove to Solomon's house for the first time since his death. It was a beautiful property on the outskirts of Atlanta, with large gardens and old trees. The house itself needed work, but it had good bones, as my brother used to say. I walked through the empty rooms, my steps echoing on the wooden floors. In his study, I found photographs of the two of us when we were young, when everything was simpler. I also found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was another letter from Solomon, this one more recent. "Brother," it said, "if you are reading this, it's because you finally came to see the house. I know you probably had to fight to get here. I know your daughter better than you think. I know how that man she married changed her." The letter continued. "Don't blame her too much, Elias. We all make mistakes when we confuse success with happiness. But I believe in her. I believe she will eventually remember who she is. Give her time. About the house. Don't sell it. Turn it into something that would have made Mom and Dad proud. Something that helps people. You'll know what to do." I folded the letter carefully and looked around. And at that moment, I knew exactly what to do. I hired architects and builders. I spent the next 3 months overseeing renovations. I converted Solomon's house into a free community legal aid center, a place where people without resources could get legal help from volunteer attorneys, a place where the principles Solomon and I shared could live on. I named it the Solomon Vance Legal Center. On the entrance plaque, I engraved a phrase our father used to tell us: "Justice is not a privilege, it is a right." On the opening day, many people came. Retired judges, young lawyers wanting to volunteer their time, families in need of help. Preston was there at the inauguration, and so was Lorraine. They gave speeches about Solomon, about me, about what this center meant to the community. I listened from the back, not wanting to be the center of attention. This wasn't about me. It was about something bigger. When everyone left and the sun began to set, I stayed alone in the center's garden. I sat on a bench under an old tree and thought about everything that had happened. How a moment of betrayal had led to this moment of purpose. I heard steps behind me. I turned and saw Serena standing there in simple clothes, without makeup, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, more like the girl I remembered. "Hello, Pop," she said, her voice uncertain. "Lorraine told me about the opening. I hope you don't mind that I came." "I don't mind," I replied. "Sit down." She sat on the bench, keeping a respectful distance. We looked at the building together, with its bright plaque at the entrance. "What you did is beautiful," she said. "Uncle Solomon would be proud." "I hope so." There was a long silence, then she spoke. "Darius and I divorced last week. He kept the big house, the expensive car, all the things I thought mattered. I moved into a small apartment. I started doing community service as part of my sentence. I'm working at a shelter for women who are victims of domestic violence, helping them with basic legal matters." I looked at her, surprised. "And how do you feel about that?" She smiled slightly. "Exhausted, humbled, and for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Those women don't know me as the successful lawyer with the big house. They know me as Serena, someone who understands what it's like to be lost and want to find the way back." "I realized something, Pop," she continued. "All these years, I thought Mom had been unhappy with you because we didn't have money. But going through her things after the divorce, I found her diary, and she wrote, over and over, that she was the happiest woman in the world, that she would rather have little money with a man of honor than all the wealth in the world with someone corrupt." Tears streamed down her face. I completely misinterpreted everything. I took her worry about money as resentment toward you when she really just wanted to make sure we had enough. But she never doubted you. She never wanted you to be different. I took her hand. Your mother was wise, and she loved you so much. She wanted you to be successful, yes, but not at any cost. "I know now," she said, "and I'm so sorry it took me so long to understand." We wound together as the sky darkened. The center's lights turned on automatically, illuminating the garden with a soft glow. "Pop," Serena said after a while, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. But I would like to try to get to know you again. To start over, slowly." "I would like that too," I replied. "It won't be easy. The damage was deep. But I think your mother would be happy to know that at least we are trying." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Can I come visit you sometimes at your house in the country? Could I help you with the garden or something?" "I would like that very much," I said. And I meant it. We stood up to leave. Serena hugged me, a long hug that reminded me of when she was a child. It wasn't the same. It probably would never be the same. But it was a start. The following months brought changes. Serena visited me every 2 weeks. At first, the visits were awkward, full of long silences and superficial conversations. But little by little, as we worked together in the garden or sat on the porch drinking coffee, we started to remember how to talk to one another. She told me about her work at the shelter, about the women she was helping, about how she was rediscovering why she wanted to be a lawyer in the first place. I told her about the community center, about the cases the volunteer lawyers were handling, about the difference we were making. One day, 6 months after the trial, Serena arrived with a proposal. "Pop," she said, "I've been thinking. The center needs more help, and I need to do something meaningful with my career. I can volunteer my time there." I looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure? It's a lot of work and it doesn't pay anything." "I know," she said, "but maybe that's exactly what I need. Work that isn't for money, but for something bigger." "I would love to have you there," I replied, "and I think your Uncle Solomon would be happy too." And so a new stage began. Serena worked at the center 2 days a week, helping families with housing issues, complicated divorces, custody disputes. I watched her transform little by little. The hardness in her eyes softened. The lines of tension on her face disappeared. She started smiling more, laughing easily. 1 year after the trial, the center had already helped over 300 families. Preston got us government funding to hire permanent staff. Lorraine became the administrator, bringing all her experience and organization to the project. I divided my time between my little house in the country and the center in Atlanta. I had found a balance between the peace I needed and the purpose that made me feel alive. One afternoon, as we were closing the center, Serena and I stayed alone in the garden. She was looking at the plaque with Solomon's name. "Do you think Uncle Solomon forgave me?" she asked. "For what I tried to do?" "I think your uncle understood human weaknesses better than anyone," I replied. "And I think he would be prouder of who you are becoming now than disappointed by who you were then." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you, Pop, for not giving up on me, for leaving the door open." "That's a father's love," I said. "It doesn't mean we approve of everything you do, but it means there will always be a way back home." Now, sitting on my porch as the sun sets behind the mountains, I think about everything that happened. I think about that day in the courtroom, about how Preston's recognition changed everything. I think about Serena's betrayal and her long road back to the light. I learned that family is not always by blood. Sometimes it is by memory, by shared values, by battles fought together. Lorraine is family. Preston is family. Everyone who works at the center, believing in justice, as I believed for 35 years, is family. But I also learned that forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a process, a road traveled step by step. Serena and I are still on that road. There are good days and difficult days. There are moments when I look into her eyes and see my girl, and others when I see scars that may never fully heal. But we are trying, and that in the end is what matters. Solomon left me more than money and property. He left me one last chance to make a difference. He left me a purpose when I thought I had none, and he gave me the means to create something that will live long after I am gone. The center will continue helping families, continue defending the voiceless, continue reminding people that justice is not a privilege. It is a right. And maybe, just maybe, my daughter will continue walking that path back to who she really is. She will continue helping others. She will continue building a life based on principles instead of greed. The stars begin to appear in the sky. The chickens are already in their coop. Everything is at peace. I raise my cup of coffee to the sky. "For you, Solomon," I whisper. I kept my promise. I did something that would have made us proud. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's be in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.